Okay, so it looks like we have a few people joining us live, which is absolutely fantastic. Hello to you all. So we will begin. This is an introduction to attachment. If you're in the wrong place, then perhaps this is just a happy mistake, and I hope you'll stay because attachment affects everyone and is relevant to all. So welcome to the first in the Transforming Autism Project's webinar series, the new webinar series. I'm Kate Beckwith and I'm TAPS psychotherapist for the Colchester area. I'm also the founder of Elle's Garden, the UK's first nature-based psychodynamic psychotherapy practice. I'm really happy to be speaking to you today, whether you're here with me now or watching this as a recording. I hope that today's webinar will give a good basic introduction to attachment theory, and that you'll be able, no matter your background or previous knowledge, to take away something useful from the webinar, something personal to you that can be thought about and taken on board in a useful way in your day-to-day lives. So this is an introduction to attachment, and we can make it more relevant to you and make that connection with autism at the end of the time we have for questions. If you find any of the session triggering, you can leave at any point. If you need any support, then please follow the links in the Q&A section for a list of organisations that can help. This is only an introduction to attachment theory. However, it's always possible that as we learn about ourselves and our children, these things can bring difficult things to the surface. And so it's always important to be mindful of our state and reach out for support as and when needed. The presentation will last around 25 minutes. Giving us lots of time for you to ask questions at the end of the webinar. If you have any technical questions or questions at the end of the webinar that you'd like to type in, you can do that typing into the Q&A function. I'll also be asking you to raise your hand if you'd like to ask your question in person, and I'll unmute you so that you can do that. This is my first time delivering a webinar on Teams, so please bear with me as I'm just learning myself. Okay, well, can you all see the slides okay? Is that looking okay to you? Fantastic. So when we're babies in the womb, we have absolutely everything we need. When we're born, we have needs, and we somehow need to communicate these needs. So it's up to the caregiver to decipher what baby needs. Every time the caregiver tries to understand and respond accordingly, the baby takes all this on board. Baby's very first experiences, like, they form the very biggest impression. As we know, the first impressions are the biggest impressions, and they have the biggest impact. That's not to say that things cannot change over time, because they can, but we all have an attachment style. And we develop this early on in our infancy and childhood. Our very early experiences shape the way we anticipate we will be responded to and the way we view or think about ourselves. So whether we are 2 or 72, we all have an attachment style. And our attachment is formed at the very beginnings of our lives and continues to be present into adulthood. So this has a fundamental effect on our relationships, the way we relate to others, the way we anticipate others will treat us. So this anticipation often creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you like. So if we walk to the shops, for example, we have a great smile on our faces, we're in a great mood, we look up and around us with this big smile, more often than not, we'll catch someone's eye and they will smile back to us, kind of confirming this great feeling back to us. If we're feeling deflated, ignored, or rejected, we might hunch our shoulders, display a frown on our face. Other shoppers are more likely to avoid us, and reaffirming this sense that people see us as someone to avoid or ignore. And that this world is not a welcoming place, if you like. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's have a little look at the next slide. I've started to describe how our attachment styles can affect our relationships, but let's go back, and I'd like to give you an overview about what we'll cover today. So I would like to explore what we mean by early attachment, learn about the who, how, why, where attachment theory first came about, the role of mothers, fathers, primary caregivers, and others, and cover the different attachment styles and the associated behaviours. And then at the end, think together about what is needed for secure attachment and have time for questions at the end. So what do we mean by early attachment? Early attachment refers to the quality of the interaction between the infant or child and the primary caregiver. So by parents repeating behaviours over and over again, the child progressively takes these interactions inside mentally, and that allows for the establishment of long-term attachment patterns. So essentially, early relationships, they form templates for subsequent relationships. So there's a quote here from Bowlby. Attachment is a deep and enduring emotional bond that connects one person to another across time and space. Attachment evolved in people and other mammals through natural selection. When we're first born, us humans, we're really incredibly vulnerable, and we do a lot of development after we're born. So our skulls are not yet fused together. Our necks can't support our relatively huge heads. We're very vulnerable to predators and the elements. We have a social brain. So we develop as part of families and communities and cultures. Attaching to a protective caregiver makes the human more likely to survive and reproduce. And babies arrive with raw material ready to be shaped and grown. And each one comes with a genetic blueprint, a unique range of possibilities. But the baby has various systems already up and running, such as digestion and breathing, but many more are incomplete, and they will only develop in response to other human input. So the origins of attachment theory. This slide is really poignant as it shows an experiment that we wouldn't necessarily reproduce today. This photo here is of Harry Harlow's experiments with baby monkeys in the 1950s, demonstrating their preference for a cloth mother to hold over a wire mother, which provided food. So monkeys who had soft tactile contact with their terry cloth mothers behaved quite differently to monkeys whose mothers were made out of hard wire. The behavioural differences that Harlow observed between the monkeys who'd grown up with surrogate mothers and those with normal mothers were, well, essentially they were much, much more timid. The experiments also demonstrated that baby monkeys with surrogate cloth wire mothers struggled to form relationships with other monkeys in adulthood and had a range of difficulties. So obviously this experiment would not be replicated with humans, but during World War II, John Bowlby noticed that the effects of separation on children from their parents. So he noticed infants become attached to adults who are sensitive and responsive and in social are sensitive in social interactions with them. So children use attachment figures as a secure base from which to explore and return back to. So patterns of attachment between infant and caregiver lead to internal working models, which are templates that guide the individual's feelings, their thoughts and their expectations in later relationships through the individual's lifespan. So that's a little bit about the origins of attachment theory. And Alfred Winnicott is a big figure in psychodynamic and psychoanalytic theory. He reminds us that there is no such thing as a baby. If you set out to describe a baby, you will find you are describing a baby and somebody. And I think this is a really poignant and helpful way to describe the importance of the relationship between parent and infant. And of course, infants develop more than one attachment. They initially develop attachments based on their relationships with both parents or their main caregiver. Families can obviously take many, many different forms, but each adult is likely to provide complementary qualities which the infant can help to make use of to meet a range of developmental needs. So let's think about different ways of being a parent. One parent will interact differently to another, and this is sometimes really quite different. Perhaps we might think about the more typical, more traditional role of fathers, perhaps as to initiate their young into the external world beyond the safety of the home, preparing them through role play, such as with play fighting. Other caregivers can provide a counterpoint to the primary caregiver, offering kind of a triangulation and balance and alternative ways of relating. The baby can then draw upon all these differences in its future relationships. But most importantly, to say that a father's role, or the role of the secondary parental figure, or if there is one, or the grandparents or the nursery staff who the child sees regularly, they're all very significant, and they help form baby or child's internal working model and how they might anticipate being treated. So the lens that they see the world through, if you like, and therefore who they feel they are. The way we see ourselves can have a very real and immediate impact on others around us. And therefore these perceptions can be confirmed back to us. So back to what I was saying at the beginning, if we're feeling low and projecting out negative feelings, we're more likely to get frowns back. We might misinterpret something someone is doing or take it very, very badly. If we're feeling bouncy and happy, that very same event we might not even notice, and certainly we would find it much easier to just brush off. This is what attachment is doing for us, but in a deep and profound, embedded, long-term way. Our expectations of how we will be perceived are created during these very early informative years. So I'd like to show you a little video now of a father who engages with his son. And this is where we might go a little bit wrong, because I have to stop sharing and come out of here and go into the video clip. So fingers crossed, everybody. Here we go. So you may have seen this clip before, as it went viral and it was shared by millions. I find it absolutely lovely. I hope you enjoy it too. I'd like you to think about how this baby experiencing this interaction, not just as a one-off, but fairly often being engaged in this way on a regular basis, might anticipate how he will be perceived and received by others. So it's just a short clip.
Oh, no, not this one. This is the grand finale of this. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. And then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? Don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy.
Brilliant. So this was a lovely dance of interaction between father and son, and what we call serve and return. The baby is serving out a communication to dad, and he's returning it back. It's not just through the speech that he's communicating, that dad's communicating, and that baby's communicating. It's also through the body language, through the gazes. It's in the hand gestures, the tone, the babbling. Father is totally there with his son. He's fully engaged, and it's beautiful to watch. He doesn't feel silly responding. He's not worried about possibly getting it wrong. It's just a really lovely attempt, and a kind of, before pre-verbal, before baby's even speaking. There's that lovely connection there. So I'm going to move on and talk about attachment styles. So this photo represents secure attachment. So it may seem a strange choice of photo. Baby is clearly in distress here. But secure attachment does not mean baby, child, adult are happy all of the time. That's just not possible. This is not a fairy tale. But what it means in terms of early attachment is that baby plays freely in the presence of the caregiver or parent. They will display distress on separation. So they'll get upset when mum or dad leaves, or parent or caregiver leaves. But when they return, they will seek comfort and eventually be soothed upon being reunited. So secure attachment is what we're all looking for and hoping to achieve. It's the gold standard, if you like. So insecure, anxious, avoidant attachment style. In terms of babies, what we're potentially looking at is a muted emotional response on separation. And baby is distant or ignores the caregiver upon being reunited. So that's why I've chosen that photograph there to represent that. So this one is insecure, anxious, ambivalent attachment styles. So the infant or child shows distress even before separation. They display resentment or helplessness during separation, and they are clingy and difficult to soothe upon being reunited. This last one is insecure, disorganized attachment style. It occurs when there's a disoriented behaviour or a lack of a clear attachment behaviour. So this is where it all links back to expectations and the child's sense of who they are. This table goes into a little more detail, but still this is an introduction to attachment, so we're only covering the basics here. These were the first 4 attachment styles that were identified, but a few others were added, and I think attachment is something that we're going to be returning to as part of this webinar series. So perhaps we'll go into that in further detail in the future. So on the left-hand side here, maybe I'll try and use this little laser pointer. Oh, I've gone a little bit too technical here, maybe for my own liking, but let's give it a go. So there's secure attachment here, and the person believes loved ones will be there for them. They're comfortable with their attachment figures and comfortable seeking and giving support. They have a positive self-view and a positive view of others. So this is secure attachment. Avoidant attachment. They believe loved ones cannot be relied upon. They distance themselves from others. So they have a positive self-view and a negative view of others. So ambivalent then. unsure or inconsistent view as to whether loved ones will be there for them. They fear rejection and consistently seek proximity. So they have a negative self-view and a positive view of others. And in disorganized, there may be a mixture of anxious and avoidant features. Attachment style is informed by previous or present trauma, and they may present as confused or disorientated. So they would have a negative self-view and a negative view of others. Let me see. There we go. This can all be quite hard-hitting, especially if this information is very new to you. So I wanted to remind you to be mindful of your current state. If you need to take a break or wanted to reach out for further support, then please do so. So at this point, I was possibly going to do a poll, but I'm not going to, just in case it goes wrong technically. So secure attachment is what we're all aiming for, and it requires a number of factors to be present in caregivers. So you're very, very welcome to take a moment and to share what you think might be needed for secure attachment by just simply typing into the Q&A section. And I'll read them out for you, but this is not a test. So please don't feel obligated at all. I'll only give a few moments to this and then I'll carry on talking. So if something pops into your head, then please add it and I will read them out. But we can also look at this at the end of the session as well. So I saw something came up, but I'm not sure if I can see it. Sorry. Maybe we'll revisit that at the end if I've missed something. Consistency. Fantastic. Okay. So that was a response to sensitive, to what we need for secure attachment. Consistency. Absolutely fantastic. Yes. So a lot of it is to do with parental sensitivity and responsiveness, and consistency goes absolutely hand in hand with this. What might the child expect? So there are various things that might get in the way of parental sensitivity and responsiveness. They're often what Ainsworth refers to as ghosts in the nursery, and we perhaps might look at that at a later webinar. I realise that I'm kind of running out of time a little bit, so I might just carry on to our next slide. So to go through it a little bit step by step, to build secure attachment, and all of this is pre-verbal communication and continues throughout infancy and childhood, whether verbal or not. It's important that the adult joins the baby or child where they are emotionally. So sensitivity and responsiveness are highly important. Babies have finely tuned systems that are incredibly sensitive. So even if you don't think you are, whatever is going on around them, whatever the feeling or the true atmosphere, they will be picking it up. So whether you've just had a confrontation with a bus driver, a disagreement with a colleague, an argument with your spouse, or you're just feeling really, really tired, even trying your absolute best to protect baby from all of this, there's still be signs that they will tune into. So that's parental sensitivity and responsiveness. So attunement and rupture and repair. So attunement refers to a caregiver's capacity to tune into their infant's emotional state and to reflect it back to the infant in ways that can help the infant feel understood. So, for example, when a child is hurt, a caregiver might change their tone of voice and their facial expression to console them, this is what we mean by attunement, tuning in to the way they feel. So the parent showing the child that they understand through their tone of voice, their body language, their facial expressions, their emotion is acknowledged, and this can help make difficult feelings bearable. So unfortunately, frequent misattunement responses or perceived misattunement responses may leave them feeling alone with their feelings and give them the impression that the caregiver is not emotionally available. So that might lead to them not trying as much to reach out emotionally. And rupture and repair. It's most important that the caregiver joins baby where they are emotionally. So babies have finely tuned systems that are very sensitive to parental stress, as I just said. So if something goes wrong or we don't get it quite right, which often happens, and this is with all humans, all parents, all caregivers, all of us will at various points get it wrong. Misunderstand a communication. If we get it right 50% of the time, then we're doing pretty well. It's in the trying that matters, and the ability to, when we do get it wrong, to repair things or attempt to repair things. And if we can repair the rupture, the thing that we got wrong, this is where the connection between you two can form. So it's in the picking up of things when and where things have gone wrong. They're often minute communications, these little moments that are actually incredibly important to the baby or child. To not berate ourselves for getting it wrong, that's highly important. Or misimagine that baby is doing it on purpose because of this reason or that. Let's move on to reciprocity. It's about giving to receive, helping to be helped, and appreciating to be appreciated. For example, if baby hands you the ball, what might you do? You might hand it back. Let's move on to containment. So the parents become the container for their child, and they have the ability to take in and withstand all of the good and the bad feelings from the baby. So the baby's distress is projected out onto the parent, who then contains their baby's anxieties. Reflective functioning and mentalizing. For example, caregiver with highly reflective functioning will be better able to recognize that a toddler's distractiveness was the result of frustration about not being able to complete a particular task rather than simply being bad. This is easier said than done, and in that moment where you know you need to get out of the house, otherwise you're going to be late for an appointment, but the child is determined to put on their own shoes and finding it impossibly frustrating. These are the moments where, if we can, we preempt the struggle. We use all our reflective functioning and our mentalizing to try and get where the child is emotionally. And what does that mean to them? It means a lot. It means everything. As adults, sometimes it feels very hard to get to where they are. But there's that quote, you either spend the time trying to help support them in that moment, despite how inconvenient it might feel, or you spend the time trying to deal with the fallout. And often this is a much, much greater amount of time. And mentalizing. In psychology, mentalization is the ability to understand the mental state of oneself and of others. So what underlies the behaviour? And then marked mirroring, you've got a treat now just at the end of the webinar, which are some beautiful photos of me. So let's see if I can get them up. So demonstrating unmarked mirroring and marked mirroring. So mirroring is incredibly important. Here we go. There's an example of unmarked mirroring, and here's an example of marked mirroring. So it's an exaggerated display coupled with soothing tone, which helps the infant to make sense of their experience. So this is not direct imitation. And Peter Fonagy, who is like the king of mentalization, he talks about this, and it's very important that it's not, when we talk about mirroring, we're not talking about an exact mirror. So if a child is incredibly upset about something, we're not showing them exactly how they feel. We're showing them with a sense of empathy and understanding and care and love. So thank you so much. I have slightly overrun, but I just wanted to re-emphasize the fact that we do not have to be 100% perfect. Getting it right 100% of the time is not possible, nor would it be healthy for the child. They need a healthy amount of frustration in order to develop in a healthy way. There are various statistics, but Peter Fonagy certainly says that even he gets it wrong a significant percentage of the time. That's not to say that we shouldn't try, because it's all about the trying, but not to beat ourselves up about it when we get it wrong, because, well, that can just lead to a whole load of difficulties. Guilt is not useful. Life is busy. And we're back to rupture and repair, keeping an open mind, apologising when we get it wrong, being open and thoughtful and spontaneous. So yeah, we come to the end of our presentation. With all of that in mind, that there are no all-knowing people out there, myself included, let's open it up to thoughts and questions, and let's have an open discussion if you would like to partake. I may not have all the exact answers to individual questions, but we can certainly think together about attachment in particular circumstances. If anyone would like to share any instances they might have. If not, I'm more than happy to just kind of continue and expand it out in terms of how attachment styles relate to autism in particular. So yeah, would you just like me to talk more widely about the link between attachment styles and autism then? Yeah, okay, fantastic. So there's a complex relationship between autism and attachment styles, and it's actually quite difficult. Research in this area is limited and actually often conflicting. However, if you have an awareness of autism, then you will have noticed from the webinar some real links between attachment styles and autism. So this is why we've chosen to provide an introduction to attachment as one of our first webinars in the new webinar series. And an awareness of this association might help you how to understand and how best to manage symptoms and facilitate the development of a secure attachment style. But like I say, there's limited information available, and I'm sure everyone can attest to that. Autism affects how people with it interact and communicate with the world, and so do the different attachment styles. Each person with autism is affected differently, and therefore they have distinct set of difficulties and strengths. But the symptoms that link most with attachment include difficulties interacting and communicating with others. So these are insecure attachments, I should say. Problems understanding others' feelings or thoughts. Anxiety about unfamiliar events or social interactions. The symptoms of insecure attachment and autism often overlap, and so much so that clinicians actually find it incredibly difficult to diagnose. So a common finding from studies is that children with autism are at higher risk of developing an insecure attachment style. The similarities between the traits of autism and those with an insecure attachment style include difficulties with social skills and communication. Linked to this, struggles with empathy, difficulties regulating emotions, muted responses or avoidance of affection, a preference for being alone, difficulties or avoidance of eye contact, repetitive self-stimulating behaviours, also known as stimming, sensory difficulties. So yeah, shall I continue just to talk about the differences between autism and insecure attachment? Would that be helpful? Should I carry on? Yeah. Please just raise your hand if you'd like me to go in a different direction. So we've talked about the similarities. Let's talk about the differences. So let's think about trust and affection. Many autistic individuals don't necessarily have an issue with trust and affection. It's more the struggle with the sensory elements involved in it. So contact, hugging, kissing, that sort of thing. Also, in the presentation, I talked about attunement. So for an autistic child, attunement to others can be very difficult. People with autism tend to be unaware of the thoughts and feelings of others, and this differs from non-autistic people, because with insecure attachment style, people tend to be hyper vigilant, if you like, towards what they perceive as other people's feelings, thoughts, and actions. So there's a real difference there. Truthfulness as well, that's a big difference. So someone with insecure attachment is much more likely to use the tactic of bending the truth, telling white lies, telling big lies, in order to get themselves out of a tricky situation, or to be looked upon more favourably. People with autism, they really struggle to deceive or tell anything less than the truth. So there's a real difference there. Issues with eating, I think, is relevant as well, because some individuals with attachment difficulties, they might struggle with food for various complex reasons, which I won't go into now, but autistic individuals tend to also have issues with food, but these are more on a sensory basis, or it's about how the food is presented, what the texture's like, what the time of the meal is, things like that. So some behaviours might appear to be typical attachment related behaviours, whereas others have marked differences. I hope that's helpful, and that kind of links those two things together and explains a little bit more about why attachment is so relevant when it comes to autism. Good. I just wait a few moments just to see if there are any other questions that kind of pop up. Ah, lovely, thank you. See, that popped up, and sorry, bear with me. I saw that there was a question and now I just need to find it. I don't know why I can't see that. Here we go. Hi, I would just like to ask about attachment to other people, please. Okay. So Okay, so let's think about, I think maybe your question might relate to how can we behave and what can we do as the caregiver. Please write another question in if I've got that wrong, but I will talk around that and then. Yes, of course. Sorry, you can unmute. Of course you can. I'm sorry. Bear with me. There we go. So I have allowed you to unmute. Oh,
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm also learning. Don't worry. Thank you so much for the presentation. I appreciate. However, what brought me to it was my issue with my autistic daughter, lovely, amazing, beautiful being. She's on the spectrum, and she's 13 at the moment, and she does have a strong attachment to people. There will be one person at the time that she would attach, and I mean it in the sense of she would want to call this person all the time. She will come and tell me, "Mommy." It could be like sometimes it lasts for 1 year, sometimes it lasts for a few months. It's a very it's a journey, and I'm learning. However, I was wondering what's your views on that, how I can support her, because obviously, calling the same person every day is not always possible, and bothering the people that have their own life is not always possible. So yes, how can I help with her with understanding? I think it's just emotional attachment. I think there's also, it's called attachment syndrome. I don't know if I'm going the right way, but I haven't not diagnosed her with any of those. I'm just observing. So yes, I'll be grateful if you can just give me any kind of tips what I can do to understand it better, please.
thank you so much for your question. It's really lovely.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, can I just double check? Did you say that she was 13?
She's 13 at the moment, yes, and it has started quite a while ago. So it would have been like it was her teacher at the beginning. She would want to see the teacher all the time. Then there was somebody like a family member. Now it's another friend of mine. It's always someone.
Right. Okay. Um, Thank you for that. It's very difficult to without being able to kind of really sit down and think together with you, and with the limited amount of time that we have left during our webinar today, it's very difficult to answer exactly. And without being with her, I often in answer to a lot of these questions, if there's a kind of um, a very deep and complex thing that might be going on behind the scenes, without seeing her in my therapy, environment on a regular basis, it's very hard to kind of work underneath what might be going on. But she's certainly communicating something something important, and the fact that she's moving that from person to person. Does she do that with you as her main caregiver, someone that she's highly attached to?
With me, we have a different attachment, I guess. I think I understood after the webinar. It's more security, obviously, and the mother, the parent attachment that gives her the exploring and returning, right? So she will always explore and return. However, this is with her. She's very happy. She's got, everything I provide for her. She's very happy, fulfilled, and creative, girl. However, this is like it feels like she falls in love with. It's very emotional when she see that person. Sometimes she cannot speak even. She's speechless, and it's very emotional. It's like the need when we feel that first, falling in love. We just need to see that person. That's how I see it. That's how I understand, because she literally gets shy, and sometimes it's overwhelming her to actually see that person. So I guess this is something, connecting to that, what I can understand from my own experience of life.
a really, really beautiful way to describe it and explain it. And actually, in a way, it's not really, although like day to day that might be causing you some issues and maybe her some heartache and some pain when she can't see that person. Actually, it's a very beautiful a very beautiful thing that's going on there, and that emotion.
Thank you so much. Maybe that's what I needed to hear, right?
It sounds wonderful.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful.
And
It just get, yeah. It gets difficult when you know that need cannot be fulfilled. That's when it gets difficult. Yes.
Absolutely. So and your role as parent to kind of guide her through that emotional pain, and sometimes it's kind of back to that mirroring and that containment that we were talking about through the webinar, that to be able to show her that you understand how she feels. And sometimes that's enough, because life is complicated. There are things that are hugely disappointing when we don't see people that we love and that we're connected to, and to be able to have that that main caregiver who can just hold that for her, just contain that, and just say that very gently back to her, acknowledging it, and also being proud of that, because that is something to be proud of, that she has that emotional connection to those
people. Yes, true. That's the cure for everything, isn't it? Embrace it and surrender to it. Thank you.
And autism and autistic traits can make these things a little bit or a lot harder. You know, it makes this game a great deal harder, but just kind of believe in yourself and keep trying, and kind of be spontaneous, and sometimes when these times when we worry, they can take us away from being present in that moment, and
it does, truly, yes.
And being kind of there and then, and so to kind of be proud of your parenting, and yeah,
always. Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate. Thank you for your time. I don't want to take too much of your time, but thank you. I appreciate that. I'll take this with me.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Blessings.
Right.
I will put, yeah.
So I'll just end then, just to end really on just saying thank you so much for joining, and just how important it is that we don't judge a parent's ability to be sensitive to their child's needs without first bearing these communication difficulties in mind, you know, because it can be incredibly difficult when the communications aren't coming in a typical way, to continuously respond in a sensitive and consistent and responsive way. So I think that's highly important to remind you all what a brilliant job you're doing, and thank you so much for those questions, because that kind of brought that into focus right there at the end. Yeah, I think that also to say thank you to TAP for the opportunity for being able to speak today. TAP's an absolutely Transforming Autism project, TAP, affectionately known as, just a fantastic charity, which is, you know, their First Steps program, their early intervention program for families with 0 to 3-year-olds with autistic traits. Is so important, and we can help on a very individual basis in those cases, and often exploring the very complex needs of their children and supporting the caregiver with how to interact with their child, and that can be incredibly mutually beneficial. So thank you to everybody for coming today. Thank you for watching if you're watching the recording, and yeah, thanks very much.